Hey, welcome back. Today, we're jumping headfirst into the slick, brutal world of John Wick. But we're not just here for the gun fu, right? We're going deeper, to look at the psychology behind it all, and maybe figure out why the Baba Yaga's biggest enemy is, well, himself. So, let me just throw this out there right at the start. I know what you're thinking. A stolen car, a dead puppy, of course it's about revenge. But what if that's just the spark? What if the whole franchise is actually built on a really clever psychological trap? Because, really, this is a story about what happens when someone goes through something horrible and just doesn't deal with the pain. Instead, it gets twisted into this cycle that looks a lot like power, a lot like control, but as we're going to see, it's a cage. And it's a cage he builds himself, one action sequence at a time.
Okay, so to really get what this cage is all about, we've got to go right back to the beginning, that moment of loss. Let's push past the simple idea of revenge and look at what really kicks this whole thing off.
So check this out. After John loses everything, he's at a fork in the road. On one side, you have the path of actually processing that loss. You know, healing, reflecting, all that tough stuff. But John, he takes the other path. He converts all that raw, painful emotion directly into action. And for him, that action is always violence.
So why? Why go down that path? And maybe more to the point, why do we love watching it so much? That brings us to our next point, the immediate, kinda deceptive satisfaction of it all.
Think about the fight scenes in John Wick. They're so clean, right? So controlled and precise. For a guy whose whole inner world is just absolute chaos, that gives him this powerful feeling of control. Every action gets an immediate result, and for a moment, it gives him a release from that pain he's running from. And this is the key. The violence is basically a painkiller. It numbs the symptom, that feeling of total grief and helplessness, but it does nothing, absolutely nothing, to treat the actual problem, which is the trauma he hasn't processed.
But here's the kicker. This temporary fix doesn't just fail to solve the problem, it actually makes everything worse. And this is how John gets himself stuck in a vicious, never-ending loop.
And this breaks it down perfectly. It starts with the pain, that unresolved trauma. That pain leads to a violent action. But in his world, every action has a reaction, which is always more violence. This just creates more problems and more pain, which, you guessed it, just starts the whole cycle over again, only bigger and badder every single time.
Which brings us to a huge theme in these movies, and maybe it's even saying something about action movies in general, the illusion of power.
I mean, let's be real. On the surface, the guy's a legend. He's the Baba Yaga. He's completely unstoppable, unbelievably skilled, and literally everyone in his world is terrified of him. He is the definition of physical power.
He's got all the skill, all the power, and all the fear in the world aimed his way, but let's just ask the most important question here. Is any of that making him free?
And that's the big contradiction at the heart of John Wick. On the outside, it looks like ultimate power and control, but his inner reality, he's a total prisoner. He's trapped by this rigid system of rules and markers and favors. He never has any peace, and here's the big one. He has no real choice. Every single thing he does is a reaction to something else.
So, if what John has isn't real strength, then what is? Let's take a look at the alternative path, the one he didn't take. You could say the whole world of the high table runs on a scarcity mindset. It's all about constant threats, survival mode, and everyone just reacting to everyone else. Real power, what you might call an abundance mindset, is the complete opposite. It doesn't have to prove anything. It comes from a place of clarity and intention, and its greatest weapon is the power of choice.
And this is really what it all comes down to. True strength isn't about being able to hit back harder. It's the internal strength to just pause, to get your emotions in check, and to consciously choose your response instead of just reacting. That right there, that's where you find real freedom. All right, so with all that said, let's pull it all together and ask our big question one last time. Is John Wick actually powerful, or is he just trapped?
This really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? It doesn't matter how many bad guys he takes down. If your life is just a series of reactions, you're not really in the driver's seat. Your past, your pain, that's what's still pulling all the strings.
And that's the tragedy of John Wick. The man can take down entire criminal organizations, but until he can change his own internal wiring, his own response to what happened, he can't ever really escape. The loop just keeps on going, forever.
So the next time you're watching these movies and you see him do something just absolutely incredible,
Try to ask a different question. It's not about his skill or how many people he's fought.
The real question is this one. Is he free? Because once you start looking at it that way, you see that real power isn't about how you react. It's all about having the choice. Thanks so much for tuning in.